I've been using VS Code for the past 7 years, and while I like most of it, there are so many new editors on the market, I wanted to give them a shot. So for the past 6 months, I've been using Neovim, Zed, and Cursor, and I want to talk about it. Now, this is just my experience, and yours may vary, but I want to talk about the things I did like, the things I didn't like, and then the editor I'm using today. So I started with Neovim, and at the same time, I learned Vim for the first time. In all my 15 years of programming, I never really learned how to use Vim, and I had some time off from parental leave, and I wanted to learn more about Vim. So I downloaded Neovim, I got set up with the Neovim Kickstart, and I was off to the races pretty quickly, learning all of the different Vim motions and key bindings and customizing my editor. And it was honestly really, really fun. I'd seen other developers use Vim before, and I always thought it was so amazing watching how fast they could just move through the file, navigating to specific lines of code, or how quickly they could change out content inside of specific pieces of code, or just navigate to one specific bit. So I just jumped right in. I very quickly learned just the basic key movements and the basic commands, all the way up to understanding the vocabulary of Vim. So if I have this paragraph tag and I want to change the contents inside of the paragraph tag, I could do CIT and remove all of that content inside of the tag, go into insert mode. So I can say, hello, I can type something, press escape, which I of course map to caps lock for my Vim fans here, to go back into the normal mode where I can kind of move around. And it was just so fun to learn all of this, to customize my editor. And I've got this, file tree on the left, and really quickly try to use my keyboard for everything moving between files and creating files. And it was a rabbit hole, to say the least. I have to give a huge shout out to the Neovim team and TJ, who were incredibly helpful. And this Kickstart repo, which helps you build your own configuration very quickly, it allowed me to get all the bits and pieces that I wanted. And along the way, as I was setting it up, I started just documenting all the things I was learning. And I built this kind of little mini course I called Vim for React developers that just gave you some exercises you could go through where you could modify React components and learn some of the Vim motions. Now, you didn't necessarily need to use Neovim for that. You could just use Vim anywhere. But this was fun for me to basically learn as I learned and teach people some of these things. So overall, I'm really glad I learned this. Neovim also gave me an appreciation for, honestly, a lot of things I'd taken for granted inside of VS Code, like language server protocols or LSPs, things like TypeScript or even Tailwind CSS. And it also made me revisit, honestly, the whole tool stack I used, even things like Git. It made me appreciate the Git support in VS Code. So for example, on this file, I made some changes. If I go ahead and save those changes, I installed the lazy Git integration into my Neovim environment, which pops up this kind of place where I can view diffs and I can commit from here. I can look at branches. I can do stashing in a little more visual way. This worked fine, and it wasn't necessarily bad. It was actually very good for a terminal environment, and I would recommend it. It just wasn't what I had came to appreciate from the simplicity of especially viewing diffs in the VS Code environment. But it was nice to be reminded of that and set up all these tools and explore the breadth of tools myself when kind of building something from scratch in the terminal. I also just completely stopped using any AI features for a few months. So no autocomplete, no Copilot, no built-in IDE editor features, just to feel what it was like and see how much the LSPs would help me out. And they were helpful, but I did miss some of the AI features. I did check out Avante, which is a Neovim plugin that gives you some of that cursor composer-like experience, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. And it was very cool. So if you are kind of bought into the Vim, Neovim ecosystem, definitely check out this plugin. Very, very cool. Okay, so lots of good stuff. What did I not like? Well, the customization is amazing. However, there definitely were a few times where I accidentally messed up the Lua config and I had to go ask GPT to help me fix my Lua config. Or maybe I just configured something wrong when updating plugins and I got into a broken state. Maybe this is a skill issue. Maybe I just don't understand it fully enough yet. But it was a little annoying to have to go through some of that configuration when you kind of just want it to work. At that point, it kind of shifted from this is a fun little side project to, oh wait, I actually need to get my work done. I need to code, and I wanted to spend less time on the configuration side. That being said, it was still fun to learn. I think the biggest reason why ultimately I decided to explore different pastures and move to Zed was the day-to-day experience of actually using it as your daily driver editor. I think, if I'm SSHing into a server, I would love to use Vim, and I think that's fantastic. But it was hard to put words to the experience of just the micro UI interactions of what VS Code or Zed or other kind of IDEs give you. It just felt better on my eyes using it every day. The small little subtle details, even like scrolling through the file, even with an amazing terminal like Ghosty, which I use as my daily driver terminal still, it just felt easier to use. So ultimately I decided, okay, I think I do want to try out Zed. I want to see how that compares. We're going to go back and forth. We're also going to try out Cursor. So I ended up moving to Zed. When Zed first came out, I gave it a shot, but it was really early and it didn't really have everything I needed. So I was looking forward to giving it another shot. And I've always appreciated their design sense, their taste. I mean, you can see it on their website. It's beautiful. And the editor also just feels great to use. It has a wonderful design. And also I have a ton of respect for them just building this from the ground up, rewritten in, I believe it's using Rust, and it's all open source, which I think is just fantastic. So I was excited to try it out again. The first thing I did was go through and configure some of the things to honestly work more like Neovim because I had gotten used to that environment. And Zed has a really fantastic Vim mode. So if you like Vim and you're totally bought into Vim motions and you've built all that muscle memory, definitely check out Zed. I thought it worked fantastic for that. And we actually made a little custom Vercel theme. There's one on the Zed extension store that's pretty close to what we had here. I tweaked some of the colors, but made it more Vercel branded. I also just love a lot of the default design choices in Zed. It feels very appealing to look at. So I enjoyed the day-to-day of just visually being inside of the editor. So the Vim support was great. I love the design. But my two big gripes, at least so far, had been around Git support or the visual Git support and then the AI features. Now, the Zed team has been incredibly receptive to feedback and very open and reaching out and getting in touch with me, which I appreciate. And I was happy to find out that they were working on both of these things. So they had their roadmap pretty open, and Git support and better kind of AI composer features were high up on the list. So I've had a chance to try out some of these new features since they've been available in Zed as well as their tab completion model. And they're definitely making a lot of good changes. So for example, in this file, I have the diff from inside of Neovim where I changed the snippet here. I can view that diff inline and stage it or delete it. And then let's say I had a change in another file as well. Down here, I can click on the Git panel. I can see the different changes and I can click and view the uncommitted changes here. If I want, I can say, yes, I want both of these changes. I can hit a commit and I can push it. Now, this has worked pretty well. I do think it's still early, so I'm sure a lot of this will change. I don't think it's out of beta yet, at least at this point, and the team's been very receptive to feedback. Although it did make me appreciate actually how robust the VS Code support for Git is. The fact that you can do a lot of different things from the command panel. So, Shift Command P Git commit, for example. Zed's added some of this in terms of branching and committing. My feedback to the team was I would love to see basically everything the VS Code one has: checking out branches, pushing to different remotes. I think Cursor also has a feature to automatically generate commits, which I don't think that Zed has yet. So they're making a lot of progress here. I thought it was really good, and I'm happy to see them pushing in this direction because the visual Git support, it's just nice. I know you can still use the editor. I was using lazy Git inside of here, but I kind of like the visual diffs. They're really helpful. Zed also has a beta for improvements to their composer editor type view. So for example, I could say, I want this file page here, and inside of here, maybe we want to replace the copy with more realistic copy. I don't know. And I can do Command Enter to chat or Command Shift Enter to suggest edits. So I'll go ahead and do that. It's going to output some of the edits, update the whole page copy to be more professional, and go ahead and suggest some of those changes. And I'm using Claude 3.5 Sonnet here, but you can change the models that you would like. And we're going to see what it comes back with. So it looks like this is done. We can click here. We can see launch your SaaS product without the hassle. So we've got a bunch of diffs here, And then if I want to go ahead and apply those, apply all with Command Shift A. So I'll go ahead and we'll apply all of those. Great. I can close this and we can see all the different changes inside of here. So that works pretty well. As I'll talk more in the cursor section, it just feels like cursor's a little bit further along in this kind of composer agent type workflow with the right side chat. But I like that Zed has made a lot of progress here. To be honest, I haven't used the composer type feature that much inside of Zed. I was mostly using it for some of the inline edits, the AI features, but I'm glad that they're making improvements here as well. By far the biggest change that Zed has made recently that I've thought was really, really helpful is they shipped their own tab complete model. So rather than using something like a GitHub Copilot for autocompletes, let's say I had something like, I don't know, inside of here, I could say const user equals, sure, we could do that. And now notice after I tabbed to complete it, it went up and said tab to edit somewhere else. So now I want to make this async, tab async, done. Okay, async get user. Maybe I want to make that change, maybe I don't. I thought that was pretty nice that it can just bop around the file. And that's especially helpful if, for example, maybe I'm doing something like, I don't know, let's say this was a client component and inside of here we wanted like, I don't know, count, set count, and we need use state. And I think one thing that I've seen from Cursor's model is it gets these errors, it handles these errors a little bit better. So I would have kind of expected a tab completion here to tell me, actually, I need to go import use state, but I can pull up this autocomplete here and I can say, oh, import from React. So it still works pretty well, but they've made huge strides with the tab completion model. So I'm really excited to see that. Now, since I've been back in an IDE like Zed and I had been away from the terminal environment, yes, I was still using the Vim mode inside of Zed, but I found myself honestly kind of regressing on my Vim features. As you can see here, I'm still in normal mode. I press I to go into the edit mode and then escape to go back. So I am still using it, but I found myself going into insert mode, making a bunch of changes, and then kind of just hanging out in insert mode and not really doing the full Vim experience. For the Vim experts here who see me like moving around like this, you're probably like, I can't believe he's just navigating up and down like, some basic, when really he should be doing the 15 down or 15 up with, the arrow keys. I never really got there. And I think honestly, it's because I have so many years of muscle memory of navigating through the keyboard with arrow keys. And I had gotten really comfortable in the coding environment that I was in. And I was willing to kind of give that all up to give it a shot with Vim. And I did really enjoy doing that. I learned a lot, but I just slowly found myself regressing on using more and more Vim features. For example, I'd be in edit mode. Yes, I could go back and do delete and tag or whatever, but I'd be in edit mode and I would just Command Shift left and just select all of that and then delete it and move around. And I had just gotten this, this kind of workflow of moving around and Command Shift left, selecting text. I'd gotten so used to it that ultimately I was like, okay, maybe I just put the Vim on pause for a sec and let's see what life is like when I go do my cursor evaluation. So finally I landed in cursor after months in Neovim and in the terminal and months in Zed. And honestly, it felt kind of good to be back in a VS Code-like environment. Now, of course, I had used VS Code for 7 years prior, so this is where I was comfortable, this is where I was familiar, but I just have a new appreciation for a lot of the things that VS Code was doing for me under the hood, and the ecosystem it had built with extensions and settings that you can override, and just overall stability of the platform. It makes sense to me why Cursor and others have decided to build on top of the VS Code foundation. You just get a lot for free. And yes, I know even if it's a wrapper, the amount of value add you're still getting out of these editors built on top of that foundation, and also being able to bring in all of your previous settings or extensions, is really, really valuable. That does mean that it also brings the cons of VS Code as well, which one of the things that I originally sought out with Neovim was it was just so much faster to boot up Neovim and Ghosty just from zero to open versus loading kind of the full IDE of a VS Code or of a Cursor. So I think that is still one downside. I can live with it if the in-editor experience is already open and still really snappy when it is open and booted and running. So that part has been okay. The reason why I've been really enjoying using Cursor is it's really two main things. It is the tab model and it is the composer feature. I know there's more that you can do in Cursor, but the autocomplete of tab, it just feels really robust. So for example, let's try that same thing where I do use client and then let's do see, even that felt a little bit faster. We'll do this. Sure, we'll do all of that. And it also got the imports right. So granted, maybe this isn't what I even really wanted to do, but this is just a demo to show that generally when it's getting the autocompletes right and you're kind of in the flow and you're tabbing along, it can get really good at understanding the next thing that you want to add. And then just doing the imports for you, it's like a little thing, but it's so nice when it does it right. So I found the tab model to be very fast, very helpful, which makes sense since the Super Maven team, who had a really great tab complete model, has since joined Cursor. That's been one thing that I've really enjoyed. The second thing is their kind of composer or agent-like feature. I just feel like the UX of the design is a little bit better actually than Zed, which is kind of ironic because visually I think that Zed has prettier pixels, but I feel like the actual UX of like how you select the context of the files like this versus /file feels a little bit better in this environment, as well as switching between ask or agent and picking between the models. Like this flow, especially applying diffs, just feels a lot better. So let's say, for example, add another button on the page below the terminal to go to the docs. I don't know. So we're going to use the agent mode here. I believe I'm using Claude as well, just in the model here. So it's going to actually generate this code. It should output a diff that I can just view on the screen and then in one click, great. So the UX here, like visually of how I understand these diffs and apply these diffs, it just feels a little bit better. I like this checkbox over here on the right, or I can accept or reject here. And I can also step through multiple files if there are multiple changes. So I've found this to be pretty good. And you can actually do quite a bit with this agent workflow. I think that if you're building something from scratch, from 0 to 1, and you want to get started building a bunch of different files, this can be really helpful. I do some work with larger monorepos and pretty large code bases, and I found that the quality of the agent output wasn't as good in those situations. Even when I had went through and indexed the whole repo inside of Cursor, it just felt like it needed a bit more hand-holding, which I think makes sense. I can't expect AI to be perfect, of course, and I know you can steer this a little bit with specific features like cursor rules and maybe giving the AI a bit more instructions. So I know it's still pretty early here, but at least for some of the basic stuff, I found this feature to be very helpful, especially if I'm jumping into a code base. I don't know exactly where to go. I've had a mixed bag of success. Sometimes it's able to basically immediately figure out where to go make the change in what file and just give me the diff. And in others, especially the larger ones, like I said, a little bit more difficult. But I'm excited for this to continue getting better. And I think one of the things that I have liked the most from the Cursor team is it feels like they are very bleeding edge, state of the art in terms of AI features. Basically, as soon as a new model or a new paradigm opens up, whether it's agents or MCP, which we can talk about, it seems like they're right on top of it and they're leading the way. So I've been very positive in that regard with Cursor. The other thing Cursor can do that's very new and still kind of rough is integrate with Model Context Protocol, which are basically like APIs for your LLMs to talk to. So your LLM can use, it's like it has an API to call APIs or really anything. So for example, we have an experimental Vercel MCP, where I could say, list all of the projects in my Vercel team. And when I use this agent mode, it's able to have the context of what MCPs I basically have installed or configured. And it can say, hey, I want to call this tool projects get projects. I can authorize it, because this could be both reads and writes or deletes. So we want to make sure that we're giving authorization. So I've got a bunch of different things here. It'll go on forever, but because I have like hundreds of different projects on this team, but there's a whole bunch of things I've built here. And it's pretty cool that there's a way, especially in an agentic way, or could potentially running in the background, even with a human in the loop, which is just a fancy way of saying me authorizing it, to allow the AI model to go talk to different services. It could be Vercel, it could be many different things. I think the future here is interesting. Maybe it's not exactly MCP, maybe it's something like this, but again, it's nice to see Cursor exploring this, integrating this, and trying to make something possible here. One thing with Cursor that I haven't really explored too much are Cursor rules, or really other MCP servers. And there's an awesome Cursor directory here from the community and the folks behind Languine and Midday, where they have a bunch of these Cursor rules that you can check out. So you're an expert in front-end dev and React and Next.js and ShadCN and all these things. You can then copy them into your repo, and it basically steers the AI in the right direction a little bit. For example, Midday has this Cursor rules that says, you're an expert in TypeScript and Node and Next.js. And they've basically hard-coded their rules for their app, exactly what they always want the AI to do and what they never want it to do. So they always want to use next safe action, and they want to prioritize server components. And they're using Nux for their query state. And they want to follow the Next.js docs for data fetching and rendering. So this is pretty cool. I haven't really dove into this too much, but I think it's interesting and it's worth exploring. So yeah, now that I've been spending more time in Cursor after months in Neovim and in Zed, I really like both of those tools, but I also have a new appreciation for Cursor, and I think it's the tool I'm going to continue to use for more months to come as I'm still trying out all of these different code editors. But by far, I think it has been my favorite tool I've used thus far, which could be, again, to my familiarity with the VS Code environment. But I just really feel like they've nailed a lot of the UX patterns around using AI models, which I don't do all the time, but when I want to do it, especially the autocomplete and the imports, it's really nice. Now, there's a few other tools that I didn't mention that I'm aware of. I'm sure I probably missed others, but I'll just give a quick shout out at the end. Windsurf is another AI-powered code editor that I know a lot of people really, really like. I haven't had a chance to really try it out yet and give it a fair shot. So maybe I'll do that over the next 6 months as I'm trying out more editors. I've heard a lot of people really rant and rave about it. So that's another one to check out. And then, of course, at Vercel, we work on V0, which allows basically anybody, a developer or not a developer, to write some prompt, write something, and build an application, build the first version of their app, whether it's something on the front end, something on the back end. I mean, obviously, I'm going to like this tool. I'm going to use it because I work at Vercel. I didn't want to spend as much time on this because you can hear me talk about V0 anytime. And I generally think that for professional software developers, they're going to be spending a lot more time in their editor. So I wanted to spend most of the time on that. But V0 is great for generating UIs, especially if you're building React or Next.js or anything in the Vercel ecosystem. It's great for that. So that wraps it up. I think if I could go back 15 years, I would probably start learning Vim from the start. It's great. And maybe that would change where I landed. But I had a great time with Neovim. It was a lot of fun. I love a lot of the parts about Zed, and the team there is fantastic. And Cursor is just continuing to get better and better. So there's never been a better time, honestly, for the state of dev tools, especially with all the improvements in AI happening incredibly rapidly. So it's a fun space to watch. It's a fun space to be in. And at least for now, I'm going to keep using Cursor and keep chugging away and see how it goes. Maybe I'll have to do another video in 6 months, but I would love to hear what you all think. Have you been trying some of this stuff out? I know I've seen comments in my videos. Oh, he's in Neovim now. He's in Zed now. And I've been kind of all over the board. So yeah, I'm curious what other people are doing. If you've been using Cursor or Neovim or Zed and you really like it, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. And maybe I'll do another one in 6 months. All right. Peace.